Excuse me. All right, let's see. We should be going here pretty soon. All right. Very nice. Good to be with you all again. This time for our Saturday show, our regular or semi-regular Saturday show, right? We meet most often on Saturdays. Sometimes I take a couple weeks or even a month or more off, depending on the time of the year, but that's not often. Usually we try to meet, like I said, every Saturday. The time is about this time, wherever you are, 6 o'clock California time. But sometimes, like last week, we'll switch it up. And then occasionally we will also do a Sunday live show. It's a different type of show. It can be one of our different shows, but it's not our Christian Witnesses of Jah show. Not usually, not unless we move it from Saturday to Sunday. And there's no real, we're not choosing Saturday over Sunday for any biblical reason, because there are days that are most convenient for us to meet together to do the things we put above everything else, right? Praise God the Father, one God of the Bible, Jah, Jah-O, are his primary names, or at least the best supported names in English, the God of the Bible. To love him with our whole heart, soul, and mind, and to treat our neighbor as ourselves. That's number 3. Golden rule. You and me. Number 2 is Jesus, and that's because he's the one the Father sent to give us life. And he's the one who taught us the golden rule, right? But he's also the one who summarized loving God with your whole heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself, when it came to the entire law, and then he fulfilled that very same law. So we believe those things are the most important for Christians to rally around, right? To unite around and to come together and to put above all else. There's a lot of other things in the Bible and things that we can still practice and teach without having to divide, unnecessarily, but it happens and we already have divisions. So we identify ourselves as Christian Witnesses of Jah because Christian alone will only get you to the next question today, unfortunately. So we have to contextualize what the Bible tells us. It doesn't tell us we're only to be known as Christians. It just says they were known as Christians. They were also known as the Way, followers of Jesus. So we do use Christian, and we're not opposed to the Way, but we can only, come up with so many names that make us distinguishable from other groups that have far different views when it comes to not only Jesus, but the one God I just mentioned. And then even not as often the golden rule, but other related issues, right? So to other groups, the three things I just mentioned that are most important to us are not the most important necessarily. There's a lot more going on in their traditions and beliefs. And, I got a question recently, is there a Bible verse that says you have to believe Jesus is created or uncreated, whichever one, in order to be saved? And I wrote back and I said, no, I'm not aware of one anyway. Right. And so I think there was a comment, but YouTube took it out either way. When I went back to see it, it wasn't there. And so maybe I have to check. If it's not there, I don't usually do a lot of checking into missing comments or deleted comments. There's something about the throat. I don't know. But it might have been something that he wrote. And either way, it was a comment about how then why are Trinitarians and non-Trinitarians at each other's throats, something like that. And I wanted to reply to it, but it wasn't there. So I figured I'd bring it up here and just point out that the reason is I could make an argument that it does require a certain understanding. For example, right? Jesus in John 6, John 8, and elsewhere. But those are 2 very obvious chapters where he says it multiple times. If you believe in me, you have life, right? And also texts like John 3:16, right? God sent forth his Son to save the world, that whoever believes in him. Well, whether Jesus says whoever believes in me, or the Bible says that everyone believing in him. The me and the him is Jesus. So it requires a belief in Jesus, right? It doesn't say whoever believes in me is a created Jesus, right? Or whoever believes in me is a non-created Jesus. It just, because whatever is true about him would be what you would have to believe. Whatever is obviously true and presented in the same text we agree our source material, that's the me. That's the he. Okay? So I see where you're going if you're listening to this. I forget the name of the guy. I'd have to look it up. I think part of the comment's still there, though. I forget where it was. It was on one of the recent comments, I think. Either way, it was the question. And so it's not so much about whether the Bible explicitly says something. Now, for us, that is the case in terms of where we draw the line, right? But again, this idea of a non-created Jesus is just fantasy, okay? The Bible never even talks about something like that. He's presented in every single categorical relationship with the Father that would be considered temporal, no matter what, or it wouldn't even exist, right? Being the Father or the Son requires an act. Well, that's time. They try to get around it with eternal generation. There's no such thing, and that's still time, okay? It's something that happened before it did happen. And if it always happened, then nothing happened because it always happened. You understand? There was no difference. You can try to justify it however you want. That's not how the Bible describes it. We understand later philosophers and people come up with ideas. One problem, that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible doesn't teach anything is uncreated that's begotten. No, nothing, right? It's just a different way of being created. You're actually, before you're begotten, right? I guess it depends on what you mean. Begotten in terms of coming out, or begotten in terms of the seed and the egg becoming the child inside the womb. Whatever, they were created. The Bible refers to that process of begetting, whether it's inside the mother or outside, all over the place as creating. I've already talked about this numerous times. So when you come to the Bible and you say, well, where does it say Jesus can't be uncreated, right? Well, we don't have to prove a negative necessarily, and certainly when every single thing that describes him is related to creation, whether before he became a man, when he became a man, or when he was raised to life as a spirit from the dead, firstborn from the dead, begotten from the dead. It's the same thing. He's not inside a mother's womb in the dead. He's dead. So then he came to life. Life-giving spirit. Became. Verb governs both. Adam becoming living soul. Jesus becoming life-giving spirit. Genomai. Done. Over. There's no real controversy in the Bible. It's just people bringing their ideas to it and saying, oh, that's what it means. Well, that's not what it says. And it never says anything like what you're talking about. So what are you talking about? Are you talking about the Bible? Oh, okay, well then begotten is a form of creation. It's real simple. It says that over and over and refers to every single thing that was ever begotten as a creation. It even uses the term verbs for begotten and creation in parallel sequence to describe wisdom in Proverbs 8, right? What is that, stupid? So it gets ridiculous, and it gets a little upsetting sometimes when people just use an idea, right? They have this idea, but it's not what the text we accept tell us at all, ever, right? The idea comes about later, and then we bring it back to these texts where it doesn't even exist, where all these things are creations, or everything's out of the Father. What are you talking about, right? You mean, so we have to have a text in light of all of that material that specifically says Jesus is created? No, of course not. Doesn't have to be those words. You know what I can say is an explicit biblical teaching? He's the firstborn of all creation. I guarantee you I could defeat you or anybody else when it comes to the most likely grammatical meaning of and semantic meaning of the terms, right? The meaning of the grammar and the meaning of the terms. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. I will have more syntactical, semantic, and contextual usage from the same or similar contemporary sources to show you I'm right and you're wrong. Now, I've talked about this for over 20 years in my writings, my debates, my videos. What are you talking about? Right? Why even ask this question in one sense? Why is it so hard to just accept Jesus? What are you talking about that he didn't exist before he became a man? The Bible literally says he was existing in the form of a God or God and took on the form of a man. Well, he was in both forms, and in both forms he was existing. So what are you talking about? It doesn't say he was existing as a plan. That's added to the text in spite of everything in that text and in other texts that show him consciously reflecting on things that happened. So you can argue all you want about different things and possibilities, right? There's always possibilities. Is that what we're doing now? That's what the atheists and evolutionists do. Look at their remote possibility. And they'll like condemn everybody over it. You know what the odds are that they're right, that everything's a random accident, even calculated by their own scientists and by mathematicians? No. You know how bad those odds are that they're throwing their whole future and current existence into? You know how good our odds are that life only comes from life, and therefore life's eternal, and that eternal life is intelligent? And I would even argue throughout history, the best available evidence point to is Jah. 1, 2, or 3 in that sequence of beliefs, I would say, very good probabilities, especially 1 and 2. Eternal life, that eternal life's intelligent. We can talk about the historical evidence for the identification among humankind for this eternal intelligent life. But we're here. And there's no other life that's been found that's even close to here, if anywhere. And the Bible knew that a long time ago. Well, it just guessed it, I guess, huh? We're the beginning, and it didn't even know that because we were an accident. And how could it know that when there's so many planets and places and galaxies and just whatever, what? The more likely guess would have been there is other life, right? And yet that's not what was believed. So, we can talk about probabilities, different things. Who do we got here? Jacob Chavez. Greetings from Michigan. Good to see you. Yeah, uncreated, created. I think it's very clear, And if you don't think it is, well, again, just believe that Jesus is the only begotten God or the only begotten Son who was with the Father, John 1, right? He's the Son of God. The sons of God are gods. They were with God. Psalm 82, John 10, all these texts that we've talked about again and again. So, we're going to be talking tonight about the events, moving our way to the 4th century where Constantine came to power and brought in heavy paganism, right? All his false gods, set up this idol, false god worship, set up an image to the first beast that we're talking about right now. We'll read about a little bit before we get into the next part, which is from 150 to 250 CE. We're not talking about apologists or different things, theology, Christology, because we're talking about Revelation 11 through 13, right? Finish this series, move on to the angels of Jah in Exodus. But, right, so we'll get back also to my series on early Christian writers, right? We're moving our way there also. We're still a bit earlier. The next writer I'm going to get into in that series, and it's coming, there's a lot going on, right, is Ignatius of Antioch. And that might be a multi-part series or a long one because there's a lot going on, right? So in our discussion about the attack by the dragon after it's been thrown down when Jesus became king after his resurrection, and the dragon was thrown down, right? He unleashed that water, like we read about. We'll read a little bit about, but in Revelation 11 through 13, dragon was thrown down, angels were thrown down. He's mad, he's angry, he's going after the woman, he's going after her seed. So he thinks he can get to her. We have the Holy Spirit manifesting on the earth uniquely, right? Stimulating the Christians, giving them gifts, helping make sure their seed grows. That's why the dragon's after it, right? He knows he's only got a little bit of time. And so he wants to interfere with the work of the ones who just removed his kind from the heavens, right? That's why they're happy. They're very happy, and we have problems. But we can get through those problems by being happy, and for good reason, right? Not just like the people who don't believe say, oh, I want to be happy. No, you're miserable. You just say that, gaslighting yourself. We want to actually be happy, okay? Based on a reasonable perspective of things in life and history. Not some phantasmic or ridiculous idea, whether it's evolution or some other religious view that doesn't have the historicity that we can point to and the evidence that we can point to in many different ways to show there's one God the Father, Jah, Jah-O, and that Jesus is a unique figure beyond anyone else. You name it, it's not even close, okay? Yeah, I know there's important figures and things, but when we talk about all the things that were said and fulfilled in him uniquely, and the datable texts that pre-exist his existence, okay, on the earth at least. So Muslims, I understand, you have Muhammad, there are other important figures, whether it's that or Mormons and Joseph Smith. Jesus is above them all, not even close when it comes to the totality of evidence that points to him as having been used by God, having been sent by God, someone whom we can follow and please God, and that's why we do this. Now, in doing that, we have to watch out. We have to watch out for the attack by the dragon, because those texts I just mentioned say he's coming after the ones who try to bear witness, right? Who do. They're bearing witness. We're bearing witness to God and Jesus and their commandments, right? Love each other as we love ourselves. Treat each other as we want to be treated. Golden rule. So we're doing those things. And so we and others who do so are going to be objects of attack at different points by the dragon. Now, we can, everyone is not the same. Our involvement with life and those around us is determined by Jah and our willingness to accept the things he puts before us and to fulfill the things that we can do as humans in his image who believe, right? We believe these things. We know we're not going to live forever just by going according to the ways of this world. That's for sure, right? And the things they believe, right, they all take us away from a happy, healthy, long life. Even if there's nothing beyond this but random accidents, which is the least likely cause of all these things that are existing. Life itself, right? You can't get life without life, and therefore, as we've said, eternal. So there's no accidental way to get life from non-life, and therefore the people who don't believe in eternal life have a problem, right? They really do, and they don't seem to be able to get out of it. It's cause and effect fallacy that traps them, right? They're not looking at science. We don't have to explain who caused God because science tells us no one caused God. Science says life's eternal. You non-theists, you random accidentalists, you worst odd believers in existence, right? So, I mean, just look, we know we're here. So we know life has always had to have been here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, because life only comes from pre-existing life. No exceptions. Sorry. Done and done. So we don't have to answer who caused God. We only have to be able to show that life is eternal, and therefore there doesn't have to be a cause for God, because God is eternal life. Even in the Bible. How about that? Why would the Bible say that? Especially since it's true, unless it wasn't true. And you don't think it is true. But it is true. So maybe you should take another look at the Bible. You non-theists, non-believers in the Bible. I know you like to make fun of it, and different people who do things you don't approve of or agree with. That's okay. We're not here for you. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a boost there in the right direction, right? Instead of worshiping a goat god or no god or just out there on your own, randomly, accidentally, whatever, on your own or with whomever you randomly and accidentally come into contact with. And even most of them don't even believe that, right? Most of them would believe in some kind of karmic or otherwise spiritual force or thing that is actually involved in their life in some way. Maybe not all, of course, but if you get right down to it, most of them, they kind of do. I find anyway. Whether or not it's true, we'll see. Choose. What else can you do, right? I'm not here to force someone to believe anything. And I'm definitely not here to have them force me to believe anything, especially if it involves sodomy, right? And usually it does. I don't know why. They like that stuff, I guess. All right, what do we got here? I said hi to Jacob Chavez, got pumped up. Brandon, Jacob Chavez from Michigan. Brandon from New Zealand, good to see you. Betsy, pleasure to have you as always. TKS, very nice. Kingdom of the Son of God. Excuse me. Greetings from La Puente, Califas. Thank you for joining us. Steve DeHaven, hello from Phoenix. Good. Thank you for mentioning your location too. Johan Robert, hey from Canada. Hey from USA to you. Johan, I think that is it. Johan. Let me know if I'm way off on that. Sorry about that. Renegade, also from New Zealand, along with Brandon. Very nice. Random Accidentalists. Yeah. I thought you guys would all like that. That's what they are, right? I mean, let's knock it off. This is so interesting when you actually properly classify people according to what they really believe, right? They freak out, usually. And of course, if it's a miscategorization, that's different, right? It's like what people always call us polytheists, Well, first of all, you're assuming something categorically for the Bible. It doesn't say in the way you say it, but no, we're not polytheists in the way you're using that term almost always, and yet they do it, right? It doesn't matter how many times we say it, right? The Bible says one God the Father, and at the very same moment, in the very next verse, in between the two verses, to say no God but one and one God the Father, it says even though there are gods, there are those who are called gods, and there are those who are gods, whether in heaven or on earth, right? Which we know is true. God tells us that. Jesus tells us that. Paul tells us that too. Right? So, and I had a question earlier today on one of my Christian Witnesses of Jah videos on Genesis 1. I think it was the number 37. Nice question. It's very detailed. He popped in a lot of text. Like, okay, well, what about this? And how do you explain if there are beings with God in Genesis 1 and they're not persons of the Trinity? Well, what about Isaiah 44:8, right? What about Isaiah 44:24? No gods besides me. I create all things by myself, right? Yeah, well, those aren't new verses to us. And I know probably maybe you haven't seen our answers before. So it's okay. But I have talked about those many times in writing, debate, and on video. I gave him links. He may not have seen any of these. So either way, right? You can take a look. I mean, they're not like buried. I found them pretty quick. Especially my 1 Corinthians 8:6 video. That was one of the videos. Right? And so right there, there's your definition right there in terms of what the Bible teaches. And quite honestly, it's as close to polytheism as you're going to get by words. Right? Poloi theoi. Many gods. There are many gods. Many sons of God and false gods, even like Satan, who really exist, even according to you people, Trinitarians, who say no other gods exist. So what about that? Was Satan with God when he created all those things? Oh, because in Genesis 1, the very video you're commenting on, it says the sons of God were with him, according to the parallel account that you also referenced in Psalm 8 and in Job 38, which we read to show that is the case. And of course, Satan is right there too. He's in the Garden of Eden. So what are you guys talking about? Do you not understand the Bible, or are you just so, it's either Trinity or nothing, right? At this point, it's like with Watchtower, right? You're all in. Sunk cost fallacy, right? Too much to get back. Well, we're glad we're not in that nightmare. We hope the best for you. Do what you can, right? But I think a lot of you are just bewilder yourselves with these false questions when the Bible's like, hey, yeah, you're misunderstanding what we're telling you. There's one God, the Father, and there's also many gods, and those who are called gods, right? Because even humans are called gods. They're not really gods, though, like Moses. But there are gods, like that text also says, and that's true too, like other texts say. So if you don't want to believe the Bible, and you want to believe these later categorical terms that you think fit with your later metaphysic that's against the Bible, go ahead. But when you come to us and you use these terms and questions, you're just showing you don't really know what we believe, and you don't really know what the Bible teaches. You only know what you believe, and regardless of what the Bible teaches, that's what you're going to believe, right? We could show you literally that there are beings. In that very video he's commenting on, I provide evidence. The only thing he does is say, you can go there, it's number 37 of this series. He just tries to contradict it. He goes, yeah, I'm lying. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been 5 months since you did this video, which he said that, and that's fine. I don't know, whatever. I don't know why it's so problematic, right? You're just providing texts that you assume contradict me. They don't. They contradict you. It's not talking about who you think it's talking about. And the very texts that we are talking about in that video tell you what to do. And you just run over to these misuses of Isaiah, denying the existence of false gods, idol gods, are literally described as the working of man's hands. And I mean, they go through all this schooling, right? And they have all these, I'm not saying everyone does, but they're really, the Trinitarians and others are really known for this high education, right? And when it comes to the context of these verses, it's like, what? What context? Trinity, right? No, you see those other verses right after Isaiah 44:8 and 44:24 that talk about who he's talking about, which isn't who you're talking about. So what are you talking about? Let's talk about what we're talking about, because I'm done. Who else is here? George Roddy Chrome. Greetings from cool high mountains of flaming hot Arizona. Sorry to hear that. Unless you like the heat. A lot of people like heat, Can be nice. Hope we got the AC if it's really, really hot right there. Some more. Ambrose, hello to you. Okay, very nice. So what we got going, you can see I'm a little pumped up, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, because we had that one question that I think got held back. I'll try to find it and approve it. I saw it, and I wanted to respond to it. I responded to that one on number 37 that I was talking about Isaiah 44:8 and 24 and these other texts. And if you look at that fact, let's bring that up real quick. I'll show you. This is how I recommend you guys, if you want to save yourselves a bunch of time, okay, do this. Let me show you this, what I just did, really, within an hour or so of the show. I'll bring it up real quick, because it wasn't that long ago, the comment. Oh, he actually replied. Oh, he's being very nice, and he enjoys the videos. So what I was saying wasn't hopefully too negative to you, but I don't always know where you're coming from either. And I don't know if well, I'll talk to you later. I don't really have a lot of time to talk on the side. That's why I do these videos. Now, if over time, whether you're a Trinitarian or not, and we just happen to get to know each other better, sure, I try to spend time with anyone I can. But I don't really have any time. Ask Bankhead and others. So unless it's like something really critical, like you're dying, you want me to come there and say hi or something, it's going to be hard, right? Just watch the videos. I thought your comments were good. You got a lot in there. This is Timothy Sykes. Nice guy, at least from his comments, his questions. I've had many comments and questions similar to this that are much more, condescending. He wasn't really like that. Let me show you it, in fact. Anyway, Timothy, take a look at it. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, great. If you want to comment on those videos I linked to you that I'm going to show everyone, go ahead and do so, right? He's free to do that. So it's just, we talk about this a lot, So I try to do this, everybody. This is what I recommend you do. Now, he wants to, I know, it's not what he wants to hear, right? Just giving me links and then, well, that's all I really have time for. And quite honestly, if you're asking me for, let me bring you guys up here, right? So here's my comments. He's right here. This was 3 hours ago. Let's go to that. So let's just go to it real quick. Probably be better. Yeah, so if you go there, it's right there. This is what I recommend you guys do. Now, again, some people like him, there may be reasons they want to talk more. And if you got time, hey, whatever. You know, how we talk about that at times, and we try to focus, right? If it's someone who's genuinely interested, we don't want to waste a ton of time, anyone or Timothy, right? If you're a hardcore Trinitarian, we don't believe Trinitarians are necessarily condemned, right? We don't think you're teaching or believing the right things about God and Jesus, but excuse me, take a drink here. I forget to do that. But we don't we don't want you guys to lose your faith, right? I'd rather you believe in the Trinity if you were just going to become an atheist, right? At least you think it's true and you're willing to give God and Jesus honor. I don't think correctly, and it's up to them ultimately, and I can't sanction you, but like if you were with us and you just weren't making an issue, trying to push Trinity metaphysically, I wouldn't have a problem with that. And you're just trying to worship. And you know, it's not easy, I know. It wouldn't be a simple thing for anybody. Be better off just focusing on your group, though, right? You're not I mean, if you think you're going to help us, well, good luck to you. But most of us have come from bigger groups and shown resilience in small groups. And we're pretty familiar with the Trinity to the extent that I think we realize why you believe it. We understand there's some reasons that make some sense. We just can't reconcile it with explicit teachings of the Bible like we've been talking about. And one you referenced, 1 Corinthians 8:6, right? So can I make this bigger? Is it going to disappear? What happened here? Where'd that go? It was, I think, oh, okay. This is better. Bigger. Right? So this guy's not been mean at all. None of you should be seeking him out. Now, if he wants to talk to you, of course, that's different. Just comment on his link and you guys can have fun. But I am in no way suggesting this person has been anything but seemingly respectful and presenting things we have talked about, right? So yeah, he could have spent more time and gone. Not everybody has that time, right? Like I was saying with me. So I don't expect everyone to have to do that. But we have done it. So what I did was, you know, he asked about this and he brought up, you know, the main text, like I said, from this video, number 37, right? So he understands what we're saying here. He brought up Isaiah 44:8, Isaiah 44:24, right? John 17:3, whole issue of glory, which I talk about my one God in three persons, central attributes. Oh, actually, you know what? There might have been a video I didn't give him correctly. That's good. We'll do it right now. What I did was, everybody, this is what I think you should do. So if someone gives you a question like this in an email or in a forum or video, right? It's not short, but it's not like, if I see a comment that's like twice this long and I get some, you're immediately deleted, okay? This one is probably just at the limit. Right? What do we got here? One intro and then one kind of brief short, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, don't go beyond that. If you go beyond 5, like multi-sentence paragraphs, it's too much. It's too much that's why I did this. I came in and I said, thank you for your comments and for your questions. See here on Isaiah 44:8. And I linked my video on that text. It literally has that text in the title. See here on Isaiah 44:24. Same thing. And the video specifically cites that text in the title. See here on John 17:3. Same thing. I could have used multiple videos, as you know. I just kept it to one. This one right here, though, see here on essential differences, I think I gave him the wrong one. Well, it might talk about that, but since I'm here, let's actually go to that. And let me correct I think I need to add one. There was another one. All right, it should show them on the side here. Oh. The one I wanted was this one, right? Oh, is that differences in nature? Hey, Timothy, I meant to link this one on the glory. So that one on the persons, it actually was also important because it, this is where you made your comment. because you brought up persons, right? I'll show you guys real quickly and we'll get to our text, everybody. It's kind of pre-show stuff. So right here, he talks about 3 divine, eternal, and sovereign persons. So the video I did share with you there, Timothy, right here. This one I linked. I guess I'll make it bigger again for you guys so everyone can see what I'm doing. So this one right here, see here on the essential differences in nature between the Father and the Son in terms of glory, because he brings up glory several times right here in relation to the persons of the Trinity. So that's why I cited the video on how many persons is God, but I should have also cited this one, Timothy. I'm going to go ahead and do it now. Additional video on the glory, texts and differences, etc. Okay, so that's also another one that will I specifically discuss glory and how there's an essential difference between the Father and the Son in terms of glory and other attributes. So I'm going to put that in here. Boom, I think I've covered it all now. So that's what I recommend you do something like this, everyone. Excuse me. You don't have a lot of time, just to go back and forth on, okay, well, the context is this and this verse here and see how, yeah, I guess you could do that. But you could also just, keep a list somewhere, scriptures and then videos that correspond to them. Videos in mind if they help. When someone asks you about that scripture, instead of spending a lot of time, if you've already talked about it, or asking me, if you already have a video that you've kept a list showing that specifically addresses that verse, tell them to see this video for that verse, and then to summarize for you, which is what I do right here. I say, your questions show you're not aware of the above videos, which happens, right? We can't see every video. It takes time. Or you can, I guess, right? Either way. So I said, please watch all of them and summarize my main points in the comments prior to going beyond your comments here. In other words, don't ignore anything I said in those videos. This happens. Someone will ask me a question. Not necessarily you, Timothy. I don't know that yet. It might, though. Sorry, so you're a nice guy, but I try to wait. I'm sorry. I just will not be moved by anyone's niceness or whatever, because it can change like that, right? So my hands are a little, there you go. They're too dry. A little sweat there. Things change real quickly. So I never allow myself to just, warm up to anyone too quickly, prematurely, right? We have to figure out who's who and what we're willing to accept and tolerate. And so I often will link videos to people who ask me these questions, and I'll say, look, I spent a whole hour or more talking about everything related to that text. So can you watch the video? And you don't have to watch it all at once. If you can't watch an hour or 2 video all at once, you can watch a movie at once, right? Oh, okay, and you're a Christian? Got it. Well, then take a little while. Figure out what my position is so you understand it and come back. This isn't a race. Do you want to know what I believe or not? Okay, well, this isn't about you, Timothy. I'm speaking in what's happened before. I'll link videos. I'll take the time to go find the videos myself, link them, and then they'll write back within an hour or so and say, none of those videos explain what I'm, and there's no way you could have watched all those videos, right? That's not what Timothy did, but I'm just saying this happens a lot. And at that point, I know it doesn't matter, right? It won't matter how much time I spend with you. You're not going to do it. It won't make any difference. Not right now. You won't watch the videos. So why would I think you're going to listen to me? That is me on the videos. Anyway, that's something to keep in mind, right? I think we all get enough questions repeatedly to have like a file where we have links to videos and things that directly address people's questions, so we can just say, okay, see this video, summarize the main points and let me know, or comment on the video if you want more. Right? I'll respond to comments, but not if they show you're not watching the video. He clearly did, right? I would say, right? He references the key texts I mentioned. Now, I would say in doing this, it also, there's something there that he's not seen that we see, right? Sons of God, other beings, like he does reference that is my position. But then he says basically, I don't know, maybe he's still thinking about it, but he seems like he believes pretty some things I don't know. I kind of have to go based on how I see what you're saying, which can be adjusted over time, so don't worry about it. Anyway, it kind of seems like he believes pretty strong in Trinity, or at least thinks that these other texts are just not compatible with my view of this, right? That this has to somehow involve divine persons. And, in terms of the sons of God and how they're there, clearly, right? Because that's what Job and Psalm says. So when we see that, and we see Isaiah 44:24 to us, in the context of those verses, like those videos I posted, it all makes sense. We don't have to go to Constantine or later Trinity. And even if you want to say a little bit before, it doesn't matter. But by that point in Constantine, it had become Orthodox doctrine, a required doctrine, or you're a heretic, right? So clearly that was not so necessary to be expressed in the Bible as the way to explain these texts. 1 Corinthians 8:4-6 doesn't take that route. It says there are other gods, whether in heaven or on earth. So it's clearly Paul there, just like in other texts that speak of one God. They're not talking about these idol gods or false gods that are all over the place in those texts in Isaiah. So, I don't know. It just seems like Trinitarians are usually pretty good at reading the context of things when it's not involving the Trinity, right? You ask them to talk about something that's totally unrelated to the Trinity, and they do a really good job. Then they get to the Trinity, and it's like, why aren't you reading the context? Not necessarily you, Timothy, because again, you haven't. Well, I would say in some sense, right, there's something that doesn't seem to be expressed here. Right? You seem kind of like pretty confident that this is a contradiction of our view of Genesis 1, Isaiah 44:24. So I think if you really look at that a little more closely, you'll see, no, at least why we don't think so. And if you continue to think so and you want to believe in Trinity, well, we understand that. We're not here to stop you. We're not here to let you contradict what we believe, so we may have issues, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, more than I have. Take a look at it, see what you believe, do what you do, and we'll just go forward. Let the master decide, right? It's not really up to us anyway, and we all need to be careful. I'm confident in my beliefs, unless I'm dealing directly with a Trinitarian or issue or someone thinking about it. I'm confident that I can convince people of the things I believe based on the available evidence. No problem. And I don't have to make stuff up. I don't have to base it on traditions that come after the fact. It's all accepted facts without interpretation, explicit statements, things I don't have to do anything but contextualize properly. Okay, where am I? We're on 44.6, right? So we're going to start. Let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to read just part of Revelation 11 through 13. And just to set the stage for what we're going to talk about next, because as you know, we left off last Saturday, 44.5. We went all the way basically to the mid 130s, right from 70 CE through the period of Domitian, Trajan. We didn't talk about everything because we can't talk about everything. That's not our goal. Our goal isn't to establish a detailed timeline. Our goal here is to simply show enough material within this timeline leading to the 4th century. The end of the 4th century basically is where we're going, close to it. enough to show that our interpretation of Revelation 11 through 13 is reasonable. It has historical foundation in events that took place after the death and resurrection of Jesus. We don't enforce our view, or my view. I don't anyway. I don't require anyone believe these interpretations of these texts. So we're just making the most out of them according to the information we have. We do believe they're important. We accept these texts as authentic in terms of having been passed down from actual apostles, the Apostle John, who was with Jesus. And whether you do or not isn't really our focus right now. Our focus is how do we make sense of these texts that we accept. So we're not here to get off into all these different, discussions. We're trying to figure out if we can make sense of these texts based on the evidence, textually and historically, like I said. So with that in mind, we've gone through to basically the mid-130s of our Common Era, right? And so we went past basically the Bar Kokhba rebellion and the consequences that had, both in terms of the Jews who tried to make the Christians follow them and their false Messiah, and the Romans who really put a beating on the Jews, similar to the destruction of 70 CE, which in both cases were horrific, not just for the Jews, but for the Christians. Now, the Jews weren't just persecuting the Christians at the Bar Kokhba rebellion. We know all the way through, or preceding that time, into the New Testament period that's described, right, from Jesus to the apostles and beyond, that the Jews were not friendly to the Christians, right? Now, some were. Of course, many Christians were Jews, so it wasn't like this, again, monolithic thing. The Jews who opposed the Christians, though, if you weren't a Jewish Christian, you probably were pretty antagonistic toward them, or I guess maybe indifferent. Either way, there's a lot of evidence showing a heavy Jewish persecution of the Christians since the first century and beyond. Now, that changed, of course, when the Christians changed and became the persecutors. We'll get to that, though. A little bit of it comes up in some of our readings. But so you have this attack that we saw mostly as the water attack from the dragon, where he, after being thrown down, came after the woman, tried to drown her and her seed, wasn't successful. The earth came to her rescue, swallowed up the river. We saw in the book of Acts, and after that, the Romans, the stable elements of this world, the thing that could blunt the attack by the dragon, repeatedly does just that. And then the dragon brings up this beast, this multi-beast beast. Let's take a look at it. Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13. We're just going to read part of it, okay? And then we're going to read some more details about what happened to the Christians that might be fulfillment of what we read here from the time of basically, we're going to start from around 150, right? These aren't meant to be a complete timeline periods we're covering, but in general, we're going to go, we went from the time after Jesus' resurrection in the book of Acts to the 60s, and then we went from the 60s to the destruction of the temple in 70. Then we went from 70 to the early 2nd century, or rather the mid-2nd century, right? We started in the early, right, because we covered the period of Domitian, Trajan. We moved up to the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And so there are things that happen, obviously, between, for example, the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the 130s, and where we're going to essentially start, which is in the mid-150s with the death of Polycarp, right? So that's not meant to like leave anything out, that 15 years. We're just using kind of basic intervals so that we can show you in sufficient videos this several 100-year period leading up to what I consider the next beast, the dragon with two horns like a lamb. All right. So in Revelation 13, the dragon stands on the shore of the sea. This is after the water attack, right? This is after it tries to drown the woman and her seed. And then gets blunted, as we see all the way through the book of Acts. And then the dragon stands on the sea. John sees a beast coming out of the sea. 7 heads, 10 crowns on its horns, and each had a blasphemous name. We talked about this last time in terms of what this likely, or at least potentially was, during the time of John. And then he says, I saw, that's the next verse, right? So I want to go actually just to 1. Let's go to the NIV, because we've been doing the NIV, and we'll be consistent, and we kind of know it a little bit at this point. So he says he saw a beast resembled a leopard coming out of the sea, had feet like a bear and a mouth like a lion. Dragon gave the beast its power, its throne, and great authority. One of the heads of the beast that seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. We talked a lot about this last time, and in the earliest parts of the show. People worship the dragon because he gave authority to the beast. Beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies. I'm getting to the part I want to read just prior to moving forward. Let me see, it might have been at the end of chapter 12, the specific verse. Yeah, right here. It's the last verse. So this is after that water attack I mentioned, right? The earth helped the woman by opening its mouth, swallowing the river the dragon had spewed out. Look at verse 17. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman. After, he was already going crazy, right? Because he had been thrown out of heaven. He was defeated. He couldn't resist the transfer of power. The resistor was broken and thrown out. So he was very angry, went right after the woman. Heaven even said, you better look out. He can't be destroyed now. He's going to have to be confined down there, and he's very angry. And he still has power according to his remaining purpose. And if he uses that against you, you're going to have trouble. But don't worry, we've conquered, right? I've conquered, so you can receive the crown, right? So this is not something permanent. This is temporary, and this is what the dragon ultimately realizes, as you're going to see. Either way, after that water attack, right after that, the earth comes to its aid, and it doesn't let him do what he wants to do, right? Dragon clearly wants to hurt the woman here with the water. Wants to hurt the woman and her seed. But it doesn't work. Or something stops him. So then he gets enraged, right? It's like, so he was beyond gone mad already, okay? And then he gets stopped. Something stops him. And he gets enraged. And he goes off to wage war against the rest of the woman's offspring. Those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus, right there. Everything the dragon's involved in is right there. It's very important that you understand this if you're going to see the reason why he changes beasts. Why does he do that? You're going to see why. Look at that. Look at these words. And this word, how about these words? Look at those three words right there. Against, how do you do this? If he's going off to wage war against those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus, what's the only way he can wage war? By verifying if they do that. How's he going to do that? How's the dragon going to wage war against the people who do that? What is this war for? It's to stop them from doing that, right? That's why they're attacked. You're doing that. What are they doing? Keeping God's commands, holding fast their testimony about Jesus. That would be the testament that what the Bible teaches about Jesus, right? Or I guess whatever's revealed to them, like Paul. So the attack, the war, has to be for the purpose of stopping that. Keeping God's commands, holding fast testimony about Jesus. So just getting them to violate God's commands or deny Jesus, right? It seems pretty obvious to me. And that's exactly what we have. That's exactly what we have. That's what we see. That's why they do it, right? Because the Christians are testifying about Jesus and what happened to him, keeping God's commands. The people persecuting them, whether it's the Jews, the Greeks, the Romans, anyone, but especially the Romans at this point with the war beyond the earth coming to the woman's aid. Because this ties in, right after this, we get the multi-beast beast, right? The part we kind of read already and have read before. The dragon is waging war against those who do that. Right there. Okay, look at that right there. So all he has to do, now we all sin, right? Just like, denying the test, you're denying Jesus or what you believe about Jesus. That's not something you just slip up and do. You don't just get weak because you had like a bad day or something happened that distracted you. You don't just kind of find yourself in a position where you're denying Jesus. You know what I mean? There's more thought going into it. there's you have to actually come to the point where that's a bigger decision than whether you're gonna, you know, skip the line without pain because you're rushed, maybe, you know what I'm saying? Something more immediate and situational that isn't right, but that happens. Denying Jesus or your testimony about Jesus isn't something like that. Same with keeping God's commands, right? It's not just about, like I said, a situational mistake or failure. It's about not trying to keep them, right? Basically, you're resisting. You're not keeping them. You may keep them and fail because of a situation or weakness, right? You wouldn't keep failing though. You might fail more than once, but it would be a consequential thing that you'd have to deal with before it right? Consequences come from sins, right? So if you don't deal with it at some point, it's going to deal with you. Either way, if you just keep struggling with something, well, that's still different. But most people don't just struggle forever with the exact same thing. That can happen. But if you're struggling with something and keeping God's commands in spite of it, that qualifies because we all fail. How many times, right? That's for the master's side. He even says, hey, someone comes to you 77 times, you're going to have to accept them. It's not as easy as that sometimes, nor do I believe that's what he was saying, if you look at it in context. The fact is, though, there's effort involved here. There's a commitment that you have to break, right? You can be committed to not stealing, but occasionally fail because you're poor. You justify it in your mind and you sin. It's wrong, but you're not like trying to. It happened, and now you feel bad and you try to make amends, right? So there's a difference between that and someone who intentionally steals from others for their own benefit and at their loss, right? Ooh. So he would have to break you. He would have to break your commitment. It's not just about you sinning, right? Because that's all of us. And that would be everybody except Jesus. But Christians, even though we make mistakes, we're still committed to keeping the right laws. We would never say, yeah, that sin I did right there, that was awesome. It's so good. Did you see that? No. We'd be shamed of it, okay? We'd be like, I don't want anyone to help. I can't believe I did that, right? Totally different. He would have to break that. He would have to break your commitment to keeping God's commands and the testimony about Jesus, believing in him based on the evidence and your experience with him and knowing that's how you're receiving forgiveness of sins, not part of a law covenant. That's the war. That's why he goes to this extent, right? Because you see, as a Christian, look at Jesus, right? He had to go through all of that. Well, that's hard. If you're really a Christian, you realize everyone dies anyway. And we are dying because of the things we need for redemption from. And if you look at things historically and the way we do, we realize that this is the provision God made all the way back when this first started, that is consistent from that time in Eden through to now, with evidence that is so unique and pervasive throughout history that it compels us to follow it, to believe it, if you're like me. He would have to break that. He would have to get you to break that, right? So that's why you see him torturing people sometimes in this period of the beast, and even with Nero, which I believe, of course, you had this transition from the water attack to the multi-beast attack happening around that time. And even continue, right? It just doesn't mean that he's never using similar things with the water attack again. It's just there's a period where he's using something new preeminently above anything else, if anything else. At least that's how it's described. Right? I don't think he'd take anything off the table necessarily. But although if he thinks that the initial water attack can't be used the same way, who knows? We don't have enough info. This is what he has. This is the goal right here. This is why This is why he tried to torture so many, right? We have accounts about many of, we have Jesus, of course, why he tried to, look at what he did. See, if he could get Jesus to lose his faith, knowing that if your faith is really in God, well, then whatever anyone else does to you will not matter. If you're faithful to him while they're doing it, you're good and they're finished. It's only when you don't accept that what they're going to do is they're going to do it to you anyway. And then you just gave up your faith, right? And so when the thief who was killed with Jesus, the evildoer, showed that faith during the time when he really had no reason other than the way Jesus was showing faith, right? He was moved by that. And he understood this was different. This is not a normal person being executed here. I'm going to go with this. That was all. That was it. See, he didn't break. Whether he followed the law to his heart to that point, probably not, right? He was probably finished. He would have stood up for his part at the end of the days like Daniel tells us and like Revelation tells us, but probably had been judged instead of given life. But he was right there with life, and he believed. So he had the opportunity right there, just like the other evildoer did. One believed, the other one did not. That's what he has to do. He has to get you not to not believe and to break your commitment. Not just get you to fail, right? That helps. Right? If he can get us to make a mistake, that does help because it weakens us, right? If we're not careful, fall into a pattern of destruction. But he's got to do that. He's got to try to get you to break here. And so we see all these figures, right? We see others. Like we didn't talk about Ignatius in detail. He's one who is said to have been, tortured pretty badly, but did not break. Now, again, we have issues with the authenticity of his writings in ways where he just doesn't, he's not the least, there's some controversy about Ignatius and his writings that don't allow people to credibly cite him on almost anything. Although he seems like he's one of our most credible writers, we just don't know what writings are the most credible. Seems like some should be, but, there's a lot of things about some of his stories that, we have to question in addition to the texts. And so I'm going to do that in more detail when we talk about the early Christian writers' views of Jesus. Probably in a month or so, we'll talk about Ignatius more, but he's right there, late first, early second century. We have Polycarp, who we're going to talk about this evening, just a moment, who was, fastened to a stake, and allegedly the flames that were burned, right, could have happened. But, some of these accounts are hard to say for sure, unless you just accept them as part of a similar narrative like in the New Testament with miracles happening. The authenticity is a little bit different with some of these later writers. So in any case, with Polycarp, we have a video on him in terms of Christology. So there's more details there. Early Christian views of Jesus. But he was, the flames allegedly didn't burn him, so they stabbed him. That's who you see on the thumbnail. Polycarp fastened to a stake with the flames kind of being averted, and the Roman, lunging in with his sword. And it's said that the blood spurted out and put the flames out. So regardless, whether, some of the more fantastic details are true, they certainly, I don't doubt them. I'm just saying, it's not the kind of details I would go running around trying to persuade someone about who didn't believe. There certainly were martyrs, many, many martyrs, and we're going to read about some in a moment. People who died and were killed and put to the extreme physical and mental test. For this, as part of this, against these people. So if he gets you to break, right, and he's trying in this period we're talking about now, where he's using the multi-beast, he's sending these waves of persecution. It's not quite consistent yet, because again, there's still these elements from what I believe is the earth blunting the water attack in Rome, And it's used as the beast, multi-beast beast by Satan now. It's this multi-beast beast, the beast that's worshipped and followed by everyone because the dragon gave it its throne. Really only fits Rome at this point. See my prior videos if you want more and why. So he's using this and putting them to these extreme physical tortures, right? Even Nero, I would say, going as far back as that, we're getting these attempts to break the Christians from their commitment to God's commands and to their testimony about Jesus. That's why these extreme things are happening. That's also why God and Jesus let them happen, because it's the accuser. The accuser is saying they will not hold up, okay? That they will deny you. I can tell you right now, look at because we all sin. You have to remember the dragon, the resistor, the slanderer. He's a man, so he knows what to do in that way. He knows how to taint us in God's eyes. That's why he gets everyone out here sodomized, right? He knows that devalues you in God's eyes because, perv. But he knows we all sin. See, he can go at any time and try to accuse us to Jesus. The Son is authority. He already knows that when we are Christians, we have forgiveness. So unless it's some reason he would allow it, he won't. But he can go and he can bring things up that put us in positions because of our sin where it's easier for him to get us to break our commitment. You see, and because of our sin in this world where we're in a period of judgment, even though we're forgiven, we have to die because of that sin unless it's the time when the Lord returns, right? So there's no changing that because this isn't the time where everything continues living forever. That's the new heavens and the new earth. So we have to keep going through this cycle, however long it lasts, where we're judged and it's determined if we kept God's command, the commitment. We didn't break our commitment to keeping those commands and our witness about Jesus. No matter how hard the dragon tried, nor how much persecution, nor how much mental anguish, no matter what he does, we don't break our commitment. Because number one, we will die anyway. And number two, he doesn't care. And he'll probably kill you right after you break it. And even if he doesn't, you'll wish you didn't break it right after you did. Because, again, you're going to die pretty soon anyway. Why not live and die for the thing that you have the best available reasons to believe is why you're here in the first place? Seems pretty reasonable to me, especially if there's no sodomy involved, right? There's a lot of reasons besides best available evidence historically. All right. So this is very important as we look at these accounts and what the dragon's all about, what he's doing, this attack. Right, he's doing the multi-beast. Going crazy. He's doing all this stuff right here. Right, the dragon's got all the authority. One's worshiping the beast. He's giving it its authority. All the inhabitants following the beast, attacking. Right, the holy ones have to have endurance during this time, which is why it's all this persecution. Right, this was known to be what the dragon was going to do. Because we're in a sinful time where we're all sinful and we're being judged and we have to be sealed by our faithfulness, which involves the dragon and his war against us. Captivity, killed by the sword, all of it, which is exactly what happened. Now, of course, if it can get you to sodomize yourself willingly and follow these perverts, that works too. So we got to be careful, right? We're going to watch out for the dragon. All right. Now, let me just check everybody real quick, and then we're going to get to a couple of our readings here. We're going to read a section from Philip Schaff, right here. Volume 2, History of the Christian Church. And I'm going to pull up an online version so I don't have to read. Sometimes I'll read out of the book if it's a small section. We're going to read a few pages here. It's very important. It's detailed, descriptive, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Let's take a quick look. Let me check you guys real quickly, though. Make sure we don't have, can happen. So where did we leave? Okay, so Bankhead on fire, very nice. Joshua Morales. Oh, so it looks like you are able to post, Joshua. I think you said something earlier about how you couldn't post. Maybe it was a temporary thing. I didn't change anything. Trust me, if you didn't say something like gone, or sometimes YouTube removes comments and things if you say certain things. And I know I can go in and approve them. I just sometimes don't have time. Sometimes I notice that. I see comments and then I don't. Either way, Rainy Peralta, Greg, can still be at JW without believing in 1914. Can you? I don't think so. I don't think you can. No, we're not. I mean, we try to include Jehovah's Watchtower people here because we realize, we believe a lot of the same things, but we don't believe in the chronology that the Watchtower presents. Well, most of us don't. We certainly don't enforce it here. There may be people who are from Watchtower like me, but who believe some of those things. But here, you can believe that if you want. You just can't be telling people they need to believe it or they're going to die at Armageddon. Okay? No, that's not biblical and that's very unchristian. But we know they do that. So there's some are misled. We know some of you are thinking that's the right thing, but rethink it and keep thinking and don't quit. Yeah, it looks like Bankhead got you there, helped you out. George Lopez here. He's also a resident, I believe, more active with Watchtower. So check George's comments right there. What does George say here? You don't have to believe in it. You just can't express it, which I would agree to avoid division in the congregation. There are many examples you see. So I guess now it's kind of like the Trinity with us. You can believe it or not believe it. Well, no, with us, I guess it's not quite the same. Never mind. George Lopez is saying they currently Watchtower allows you to not believe it, but you can't verbally say you don't believe it. So we'll just go with that. I'm not going to get off onto it. Right. I don't think it would be correct for a Christian to require other Christians to believe in 1914 or be rejected, which I believe is still the case with Watchtower. Like George is saying, if you openly say you don't believe it, then maybe there'd be a problem. So I don't think that should be the case, but maybe it's a little bit more easier now to be in Watchtower. I think if they found out you didn't believe in it, well, I guess if you don't make an issue out of it, probably they'd leave you alone. Okay. What else is going on here? Okay, well, it looks like you guys are doing good. I'm just going to let it go. I don't want to get off. Let's get back to the part I wanted to discuss. All right, so Philip Schaff, I'm going to bring you guys up. This is an online version of this right here, okay? So I'll try to put this in the link below if it helps. It's a good source. It's a little bit older source, but still effective for our purposes for sure, because I want to read just certain information that helps you understand the periods I'm talking about and what happened and how it relates to Revelation 11 through 13. Okay, so we want to go page 51. Okay, we're close. Right here. Is that right? No, I think it's up here, actually. Yeah, I think it's on 36. I don't know why I put that there. Yes, 36 through 41. So we're going to read this together, part most of it. So let's get ready. Right here. So we're picking up basically with this reading right around the mid 150s. Right, so we left off around the mid 130s last time. Now we're just moving a little bit into the mid 150s with Polycarp. So let's read this part together from Philip Schaff's History of the Christian Church, Volume 2. And in this online edition, it's page 36. Starting with the paragraph, Antonius Pius protected the Christians from the tumultuous violence which broke out against them on account of the frequent public calamities. But the edict described, let me make this a little bigger actually. There. That's even better. Although that cuts it off. Okay. So I think that's will that be? No. It's too big if I do it anymore. So we'll just leave it at that. And here we go. But the edict ascribed to him addressed to the deputies of the Asiatic cities, testifying to the innocence of the Christians and holding them up to the heathen as models of fidelity and zeal and worship of God, could hardly have come from an emperor who bore the honorable title of Pius, talking about Antonius Pius, for his conscientious adherence to the religion of his fathers, and in any case he could not have controlled the conduct of the provincial governors and the fury of the people against an illegal religion, talking about Christianity, right? And as we read last time, we saw how during Trajan, Christianity was illegal in one sense, but they didn't go trying to find out if you were something. Kind of like what George said about 1914, I think. And in any case, the persecution, where's that? We're looking at how the Roman multi-beast is dealing with the Christians. And I believe that the earth and the multi-beast represent Rome in different phases. The first not used by the dragon, the second used by the dragon. It fits everything about Rome during that time, and I don't see any other candidate. And in fact, is the one doing the very thing that Revelation 13 or Revelation 12:17 said the dragon went off to wage war to do. To break the commitment of those who keep God's commands and bear witness to Jesus. That's what Rome did. Repeatedly, right? And all the way through to the dragon with two horns like a lamb, as I will show. So there's not like another candidate here that could be this beast. It's the only one that really fits historically. And there's no reason to the Jews are still here at different points, but they're more a part of the ongoing effect from the water attack if the timeline that we're showing from the start to the end of the book of Acts and thereafter is correct. So they're still here, they're still involved. It's just they're not as effective as this beast. It's this beast the dragon has chosen to really use above anything else at this time, according to what we read. So it says the persecution of the church at Smyrna and the martyrdom of its venerable bishop, talking about Polycarp, I'm down here at the bottom, which was formerly assigned to the year 167 under the reign of Marcus Aurelius, took place according to more recent research under Antonius in 155. And of course, this is a little bit older volume with regard to Schaff, but these are the dates that are most often used. When Statius Quadratus was proconsul in Asia Minor. Polycarp was a friend, a personal friend and pupil of the Apostle John and chief presbyter of the church at Smyrna. And again, I have a whole video on Polycarp's theology and Christology, if you'd like to take a look. We're going to do one on Ignatius soon, maybe more than one. We're a church at Smyrna where a plain stone monument still marks his grave. He was the teacher of Irenaeus of Lyons, and thus the connecting link between the apostolic and post-apostolic ages. As he died in 155 at an age of 86 years or more, he must have been born AD 69, a year before the destruction of Jerusalem, and may have enjoyed the friendship of St. John for 20 years or more. This gives additional weight to his testimony concerning apostolic traditions and writings. We have from him a beautiful epistle which echoes the apostolic teaching and will be noticed in another chapter. Okay. Polycarp steadfastly refused before the proconsul to deny his king and savior, whom he had served 80 years, and from whom he had experienced nothing but love and mercy. He joyfully went up to the stake and amidst the flames praised God for having deemed him worthy to be numbered among his martyrs, to drink the cup of Christ's sufferings unto the eternal resurrection of the soul and the body in the incorruption of the Holy Spirit. Excuse me. The slightly legendary, that was a quote, part of it anyway, the slightly legendary account in the letter of the Church of Smyrna states that flames avoided the body of the saint, leaving it unharmed, like gold tried in the fire. Also, the Christian bystanders insisted that they perceived a sweet odor as of incense. Then the executioner thrust his sword into the body, and the stream of blood at once extinguished the flame. The corpse was burned after the Roman custom, but the bones were preserved by the church and held more precious than gold and diamonds. The death of his last witness of the apostolic age checked the fury of the populace, and the proconsul suspended the persecution. Now moving to the period of Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180, excuse me. He talks about, well, we'll read this first paragraph. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher on the throne, was a well-educated, just, kind, and amiable emperor and reached the old Roman ideal of self-reliant Stoic virtue. This one, I'm trying to get this to make there. Highlight. But for this very reason, he had no empathy with Christianity and probably regarded it as an absurd and fanatical superstition. Marcus Aurelius had no room in his cosmopolitan philanthropy for the purest and most innocent of his subjects, many of whom served in his own army. He was flooded with apologies of Melito, Miltiades, Athenagoras in behalf of the persecuted Christians, but turned a deaf ear to them. Only once in his meditations does he allude to them, and then was scorn, tracing their noble enthusiasm for martyrdom to sheer obstinacy and love for theatrical display. And then Schaff says his excuse is ignorance. If he probably never read a line of the New Testament, nor of the apologies addressed to him. Belonging to the later Stoical school, which believed in immediate absorption after death into the divine essence, he considered the Christian doctrine of the immortality of the soul with its moral consequences as vicious and dangerous to the welfare of the state. A law was passed under his reign punishing everyone with exile who should endeavor to influence people's mind by fear of the divinity, And this law was no doubt aimed at the Christians. At all events, his reign was a stormy time for the church. Excuse me. I start reading a lot during these meetings sometimes, and I realize, so I got to take a drink. I apologize. Although the persecutions cannot be directly traced to him, the law of Trajan was sufficient to justify the severest measures against the followers of the forbidden religion. About the year 170, the apologist Melito wrote, "The race of the worshippers of God in Asia is now persecuted by new edicts as it never has been heretofore. Shameless, greedy sycophants finding occasion in the edicts now plunder the innocent day and night." Excuse me. It's in 170, Melito writing about the conditions of the Christians. The empire was visited at that time by a number of conflagrations, a destructive flood of the Tiber, an earthquake, insurrections, and particularly a pestilence which spread from Ethiopia to Gaul. This gave rise to bloody persecutions in which government and people united against the enemies of the gods and the supposed authors of these misfortunes. Celsus, a well-known enemy of Christians to whom Origen wrote, Celsus expressed his joy that the demon of the Christians was not only reviled but banished from every land and sea, and saw in his judgment the fulfillment of the oracle. This is in the 2nd century, again, late 2nd century. The mills of the gods grind late. Applying that to the Christians. But at the same time, these persecutions and the simultaneous literary assaults on Christianity by Celsus and Lucian show that the new religion was constantly gaining importance in the empire. You see, it wasn't working, everybody. It was working, but it wasn't working, right? It was working when Pliny got Christians to deny the Christ, right? That's the war. That's the dragon waging war on those who keep God's commands and bear witness about Jesus. Oh, you're a Christian? Do you want to die? You want us to torture you right now? All right, offer some incense, thank the gods, and off with you. Okay, right there. There's the war. The ones who, like Pliny wrote, did so and were spared, the dragon won that battle. The ones who didn't and who were killed, the dragon lost that battle. And with this ongoing war designed to break the commitment of those who keep God's commands and who have testimony about Jesus, that continued happening. And in spite of it, the new religion was constantly gaining importance in the empire. You see, it's not working enough. I'm trying to show you, we're building up to why the dragon changed. Next week, next Saturday, we're going to cover the period from 250, which is where we're ending tonight, past the Council of Nicaea. Okay, and then we're going to do one show after that. So we're 2 shows away after today from finishing this series on Revelation 11 through 13. Now we're in 170, around late 2nd century, and no matter, in spite of all these persecutions, in spite of all these tortures, in spite of the dragon winning some and losing some, the seed of the woman continues to grow. In 177, the churches of Lyons and Vienna in the south of France underwent a severe trial. Heathen slaves were forced by the rack to declare that their Christian masters practiced all the unnatural vices rumor charged them with, and this was made to justify the exquisite tortures to which the Christians were subjected. But the sufferers, strengthened by the fountain of living water from the heart of Christ, displayed extraordinary faith and steadfastness, and felt nothing can be fearful where the love of the Father is, nothing painful where shines the glory of Christ. The most distinguished victims of this Gallic persecution were the Bishop Pothinus, who at the age of 90 years and just recovered from a sickness, was subjected to all sorts of abuse and then thrown into a dismal dungeon where he died in 2 days. The Virgin Blandina, a slave who showed almost superhuman strength and constancy under the most cruel tortures, and was at last thrown to a wild beast in a net. Ponticus, a boy of 15 years who could be deterred by no sort of cruelty while confessing his Savior. The corpses of the martyrs which covered the streets were shamefully mutilated, then burned, and the ashes cast into the Rhone, lest any remnants of the enemies of the gods might desecrate the soil. At last the people grew weary of slaughter, and a considerable number of Christians survived once again. The war rages on, dragon wins some, dragon loses some, seed of the woman continues to thrive. We know how angry he gets, right? The martyrs of Lyons distinguished themselves by true humility, disclaiming in their prison that little of honor, as due only, they said, to the faithful and true witness. That title of honor, as due only, they said, to the faithful and true witness, the firstborn from the dead, the Prince of Life, and to those of his followers who had already sealed their fidelity, loyalty to Christ with their blood. About the same time, a persecution of less extent appears to have visited Autun near Lyons. We're in the late 2nd century. Symphorinus, a young man of good family, having refused to fall down before the image of Cybele, was condemned to be beheaded. On his way to the place of execution, his own mother called to him, "My son, be firm and fear not that death which so cruelly leads to life. Look to him who reigns in heaven. Today is thy earthly life not taken from thee, but transferred by a blessed exchange into the life of heaven." Isn't that a nice mother? The story of the Thundering Legion rests on the fact of remarkable deliverance of the Roman army in Hungary by a sudden shower, which quenched their burning thirst and frightened their barbarian enemies. This one, they didn't really believe that, though. It's more just events involving the Christians. Isolated cases of martyrdom. He refers to Justin Martyr at Rome in the year 166, death being traced to the machinations of Crescens, a cynic philosopher. And he says, Marcus Aurelius was succeeded by his cruel and contemptible son Commodus, 180 to 192, who wallowed in the mire of every sensual debauchery and displayed at the same time, like Nero, the most ridiculous vanity as dancer and singer, and in the character of buffoon, kind of like Madonna. But he was accidentally made to favor the Christians, right? Isn't that weird? Must be driving the dragon crazy, huh? Because the dragon probably thinks he's got like another Nero opportunity here to punish the seed of the woman. And it turns out that as crazy and ridiculous as Commodus was, he was influenced to favor the Christians by a concubine, Marcia, and accordingly did not disturb them. This was in the late 2nd century, yet very late. And under his reign, a Roman senator Apollonius was put to death for his faith. So again, the dragon wins some, and the dragon doesn't win some. And the seed of the woman continues to thrive. All right. With Septimus Severus, 193 to 211, we're in the 3rd century now, who was of Punic descent and had a Syrian wife, a line of emperors, Caracalla, Heliogabalus, Alexander Severus, came to the throne, who were rather Oriental than Roman in their spirit and were therefore far less concerned than the Antonines to maintain the old state religion. Yet toward the close of the 2nd century, there was no lack of local persecutions. And Clement of Alexandria wrote of those times, "Many martyrs are daily burned, confined, or beheaded before our eyes." That's the dragon losing, by the way. In the beginning of the 3rd century, 202, Septimus Severus, then turned perhaps by Montanistic excesses, enacted a rigid law against the further spread of both Christianity and Judaism. This occasioned violent persecutions in Egypt and in North Africa, and some of the fairest flowers of martyrdom. In Alexandria, in consequence of this law, Leonidas, father of the renowned Origen, was beheaded. Potamiana, a virgin of rare beauty of body and spirit, was threatened by beastly passion with treatment worse than death, and after cruel tortures, slowly burned with her mother in boiling pitch. One of the executioners, Basilides, smitten with sympathy, shielded them somewhat from abuse, and soon after their death embraced Christianity and was beheaded. He declared that Potamiana had appeared to him in the night, interceded with Christ for him, and set upon his head the martyr's crown. Almost done. In Carthage, some catechumens, 3 young men and 2 young women, probably of the sect of the Montanus, showed remarkable steadfastness and fidelity in the dungeon and at the place of execution. Perpetua, I think that's how you say it, a young woman of noble birth, resisting, not without violent struggle, both the entreaties of her aged heathen father and the appeal of her helpless babe upon her breast, sacrificed the deep and tender feelings of a daughter and a mother to the Lord who died for her. Felicitas, a slave, then delivered a child in the same dungeon, answered the jailer who reminded her of the still keener pains of martyrdom. Quote, "Now I suffer what I suffer, but then another will suffer for me, because I shall suffer for him." All remaining firm, they were cast to the wild beasts at the next public festival, having first interchanged the parting kiss of hope and a speedy reunion in heaven. The same state of things continued through the first years of Caracalla, 211 to 217, though this gloomy misanthrope passed no laws against the Christians. The abandoned youth El Galbal, or Heliogabalus, 218 to 222, who polluted the throne by the black vices and volleys, tolerated all the religions in the hope of at last merging them in his favorite Syrian worship of the sun, with its abominable excesses. He himself was a priest of the god of the sun, and thence took his name. His far more worthy cousin and successor, Alexander Severus, 222 to 235, was addicted to a higher kind of religious eclecticism and syncreticism, a pantheistic hero worship. He placed the busts of Abraham and Christ, trying to get this to highlight, in his domestic chapel. I'm right in the middle here. I don't know why it's not highlighting. With those of Orpheus, Apollonius of Tyana, and the better Roman emperors, and had the gospel rule, "As ye would that men do to you, do ye even to them." The golden rule, our number 3. He had it engraven on the walls of his palace, Alexander Severus, in 222 to 223, and on public monuments. His mother, Julia Mamea, was a patroness of Origen. His assassin, Maximus Thracian, 235 to 238, first a herdsman, afterwards a soldier, restored again to the persecution out of mere opposition to his predecessor, and gave free course to the popular fury against the enemies of the gods, Christians, which was at that time excited anew by an earthquake. It is uncertain whether he ordered the entire clergy or the bishops to be killed. He was a rude barbarian who plundered also heathen temples. Maximus the Thracian, 235 to 238. Gordianus, 208 to 244, left the church undisturbed. Philip the Arabian, 244 to 249, was even supposed to be, by some, to be a Christian, and was termed by Jerome primus omnium ex Romanus, imperatoribus Christianus. Forgive my Latin. It is certain that Origen wrote letters to him and to his wife Severa, right? So we're at you can see where the dragon would not be getting the kind of results, right? People continue to turn to Christianity. The seed of the woman is not dying, it's thriving. Right in the heart of the beast. Last paragraph. This season of repose, however, cooled, and moral zeal and brotherly love of the Christians and the mighty storm under the falling rain served well to restore the purity of the church, right? In other words, a storm was coming, which we'll get to next time when we talk more about the period from 249 to 260 and thereafter, including the Council of Nicaea. You don't want to miss it, right? But we've gone now all the way to 249, everybody. And we can see very clearly, can't we, how the dragon is attacking the seed of the woman, trying to get those who follow the Christ to break their commitment to God and to him. How he does it with torture, with abuse, with all kinds of things. But it just doesn't get him the results that he's looking for. Not if he's waging war to stop them. I'm going to use the restroom and we're going to come back and wrap it up, okay? We're almost done. And then we'll partake. Excuse me. Let's do a quick check on you guys. All right. Well, we'll let you guys work that out. Excuse me. I want to get prepared, though, for our last reading. We're almost done. Just want to share one other article with you. To kind of complement what we just read from Schaff in our ongoing evaluation of the attack by the dragon. First using the water attack, now using the multi-beast. Working our way up to the appearance of this dragon with two horns like a lamb, which will happen next week. So let me go ahead and bring up our last reading. We'll review it, conclude this show, partake. I will be back tomorrow, by the way. We're going to do open session number 30. And it's going to be like a total open session, okay? So basically, anything. Anything you guys want to talk about. I know Hick Harriet had a question about make and create. So whatever. I talked a little bit about that. That wasn't meant for you earlier, Hick Harriet, because I don't even know what your view is. But it's like I said, there's another question that came up on creating that. But either way, we can talk more about anything you guys want tomorrow. I'm probably going to do the show a little earlier. Probably around 11 or 12 in the morning or early afternoon, California time. I'll do my best to accommodate you guys in that way, but it's not always easy. Next week, I'm just going to do a Saturday show. And for the next several weeks, just a Saturday show, because I can't always do 2 shows a weekend. And, we'll do a nice, good, open session, get as many questions as we can in so that, give you something to think about until our next open session. We'll take a few weekends off and just do one show for a while. So where's that? I tried to bring that up. There it is. So let me bring you guys up now. So this article here, it's an Oxford published journal, past and present. This is an article by James Cork Webster, volume 261, issue 1, November 2023. You can see the link right there. Not very long, so if you want to copy it, I'll try to put it in the description below if I can remember. Here it is right here. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just read a small section of this, but that I think will complement, again, what we just talked about, and then put us right at that 250 mark for next show, for the next show. So let's get down to the part where we're going to read. Good article overall. Kind of looks at it a little differently than many people in terms of the reason for persecution. He sees it as more of like an insider problem. He does a good job of at least, explaining that position. I think there's some merit to it. You're going to see. Let's start right here. Seen in this light, the consensus position delineated above that the Christians suffered because of the irrational hatred of non-Christians for the stereotyped conceptions of Christians' supposed shared beliefs or behaviors echoes elements, mutatis mutandis, of both Moore's position and that to which he was reacting. In other words, of his historiographical trends long superseded. Okay, he's just referring to the prior discussion where he was introducing these other views that basically attribute the persecution of the Christians as something external to the Christians. The way people are reacting to them as basically atheists, non-worshippers of their gods, or with respect to the Jews, the differences they have with them. So he's seen it as the outside. He's referring to the consensus view that this persecution is just coming from the way other people are seeing the Christians. So now look at what he says. Nuremberg's riposte thus offers an interesting foundation of an alternative approach to the study of early Christian persecution. What is most important for our purposes is the question of agency. Crucial to Nuremberg's thesis was the identification of an obsession with informers in Jewish and Muslim accounts of this period. Here, too, delation was the main catalyst by which victims came to suffer at the hands of governments. Moore had recognized this mechanism in passing, but paid no attention to it, focusing instead on the courtly literati's assimilation of these scattered accusations into systemic and sustained stereotypes with which to consolidate their influence. I apologize for the wordiness. This is a scholarly article. Just stay with me, okay? Nuremberg, however, recognized that these accusations and those who made them were the heart of the matter. Most intriguingly, his survey of them revealed that the majority were not intergroup, but intragroup. Victims usually suffered not at the hands of outsiders, but of those close to them. That fed this conclusion that these persecutions cannot be dismissed as motivated by irrational hatred of stereotyped outsiders, but in fact were fed by rational competitive urges within communities. Ha! That's exactly that happens so often today, don't you agree? Let me read that again. Victims, we're talking about Christians here, usually suffered not at the hands of outsiders, like Romans, Jews, but of those close to them. Think Judas Iscariot, okay? That's how the dragon works. That fed his conclusion that these persecutions cannot be dismissed as motivated by irrational hatred of stereotyped outsiders, people who just think certain things about the Christians, like they're atheists, so they hate them. But in fact, were fed by rational competitive urges within communities. Isn't that amazing? That happens, right? You would think everyone would just be rallying around, promoting the Christ. Instead, it becomes this competitive urge within our communities. It really is destructive. Right? It's what leads all this other stuff to happen. Watch, look what he says. In particular, Nuremberg drew attention to how often the archive speaks to the everyday financial tensions of these communities and the financial gains in confiscated property, for example, to be made by opportunistic accusations. This comparative example prompts an alternative hypothesis that the persecution of early Christians arose from insiders. That is, those within their own communities, whose actions were motivated by commonplace rational concerns rather than fear or suspicion of a religion other than their own. These delators might have been business associates, neighbors, friends, or even family, and thus might have indeed have been those who subscribed to traditional Greco-Roman religion or to Judaism, but they were incidentally rather than necessarily so. Put another way, it was the routine concerns they shared rather than the religious sensibilities they did not, which motivated their actions. Most controversially, this hypothesis allows for the possibility that these persecuting insiders could have been other Christians. I trust that it will not be considered reductionist to say that social intimacy was more important in catalyzing persecution than religion. In other words, the people closest to those being persecuted would likely have been, it's not too radical of a thought. Since, as will become clear, religious issues, just not necessarily different religious identities, were precisely one such matter of shared routine concern. This final aspect may seem on the face of it controversial, but in fact, two straightforward examples of Christians accusing other Christians to the Roman authorities hide in plain sight in our extant sources from antiquity. This is the last part we're going to read, right? So whether or not you see this theory is correct, or more likely, right, that the persecutions we read about, regardless of whether they're in Acts or thereafter, whether or not they're motivated by these, these stereotypes from outsiders or from insiders who have issues with people who then create trouble, bringing in the outsiders, I want you to pay close attention at least to this last part we're going to read, these two examples he gives, so that you see the thinking and description of events during these times as it relates to the Christians and how they're being treated by Rome. Others too, but in our case, for the purposes of the beast attacking the seed of the woman, think of it in terms of how they're being treated by Rome. Okay, the first example. The first comes from Justin Martyr, a private teacher of philosophy in mid-2nd century Rome. His first apology is framed as an address and petition to the emperors Antonius Pius, Marcus Aurelius, and Lucius Verus. One recurring theme is the presence of those Justin considers unworthy to be called Christians, who think differently about certain Christian matters and are thus dubbed heretics, like we see happen also later, right? In the Christian community, and whoever may be found not living as he taught, this is Justin Martyr writing to these emperors, to try to get them not to think that certain people who claim to be Christian are Christian. And Cork Webster is saying, the author of this article, that's where a lot of this is coming from. This differentiation between Christians in ways where it becomes a problem from within that then leads into problems from outside because of the actions or the accusations and the things that happened inside. So Justin says, and whoever may be found not living as he taught, do not acknowledge them, he's writing to the emperors, as being Christians, even though they may have the teachings of Christ on the tip of their tongues. Justin explores this via a series of biblical quotations which culminate in the assertion that every tree not producing good fruit is chopped down and tossed into the fire. That in turn leads to a direct appeal to the emperors. We request that those not living in accordance with his teachings, Jesus' teachings, and only called Christians be punished by you. In other words, if they're just called Christians, but they're not living by his teachings, punish them. Here then we have someone self-identifying as a Christian, explicitly requesting that the Roman authorities punish others who self-identify the same way. So we clearly have this, and we've had this even since Paul, right? He wrote about it. We know this happens, but it certainly didn't go away. And we have, of course, one standard being used here by Justin in the mid-2nd century, and of course another one later in the early 4th century for who's a heretic, right? So now, I don't see any real problem with Justin, saying that people who lie and pretend to be Christians should be punished. But the point that Cork Webster's making is that calls attention calls the Roman authorities' attention to these so-called Christians, leading to their persecution and potentially to some of these stories, right? It could also involve others about whom Justin may not be writing, but they're just there as part of this group of Christians in some way. Or some might not be aware, right? They didn't have the internet back then. And Satan was allowed to deceive in ways that tested Christians' loyalty. So you can find yourself in the company of a lot of different people, potentially. And so if you direct the Roman authorities' attention to this difference, they may feel more justified if they didn't otherwise think they should mistreat Christians. Later, talking again of heretics, Justin strives to prove that some Christians do not merit the name. And all those sent forth by these, as we asserted, are called Christians, in the same way that among the philosophers, those not sharing teachings have the common name of philosophy predicated of them. He then implies that these may be guilty of precisely those crimes about which we know rumors circulated in relation to Christianity. Quoting Justin, but whether they also do those shameful deeds told like myths, the toppling of the lampstand, the unrestrained sexual acts and feasts of human flesh, we are not sure. In other words, Justin not only urges the Roman government to violence against quote-unquote Christians, he also propagates precisely those rumors about which he and other apologists complain. This should not surprise us. Justin was one private teacher among many, catering to a small number of pupils in urban Rome. In his competitive pedagogical environment, those with whom he disagreed doctrinally challenged his teaching, his status, and his livelihood. Justin tells us how he experienced one such intellectual spat with the cynic Crescens to prompt his own arrest. Quote, and I too expect to be targeted and impaled on wood. Zillow, right here. By one of those mentioned, or at least by Crescens, that lover of bluster and boast in equal measure. Pedagogical disagreements, feuds, and tensions, like most, could end up in court. Only a misguided assumption that Christians were immune from such tensions, to which almost all early Christian literature tells the lie, prevents the conclusion that their infighting could do likewise. Okay, we're almost done. Last couple paragraphs. The second piece of evidence is a mid-3rd century document preserved in Eusebius's ecclesiastical history. So taking us right to the end of our timeline in this video, to 250, mid-3rd century. Concerning Paul of Samosata, bishop of Antioch, Paul, labeled a heretic, was at the center of a major church controversy that catalyzed 2 synods. After the second, he was excommunicated and replaced as a bishop by one Domnus, a decision Paul refused to accept, Paul of Samosata. The sequel is instructive, quoting Eusebius. But since Paul by no means wanted to give up possession of the meeting house of the church, this is mid-3rd century, the Emperor Aurelian was petitioned and took care of the matter most justly, ordering them to allot the meeting house to those whom the bishops of Italy and the city of Rome might adjudge it. In this way, the aforementioned man was driven out of the church by the ruler of the world. With the uttermost shame, such a man was Aurelian towards us at this time. But further on in his reign, he was minded differently towards us, and at that time, he was swayed by the counsel of certain people to raise a persecution against us. Eusebius there. So here we are, mid-3rd century now, everybody. Right, we've gone from last video in Bar Kokhba rebellion, mid-130s, to the martyrdom of Polycarp in the mid-150s. Right, we discussed all the different tortures and executions of Christians, martyrdom of Justin Martyr, martyrdom of Justin Martyr, and others. But we also saw, didn't we, as we just read in Eusebius, this ongoing shift in policy where the dragon clearly could be using the beast of Rome to do exactly what he's trying to do, get them to break their commitment to keeping the commandments of God and their testimony about Jesus. That's exactly what the Romans did repeatedly, all the way from the point of Nero, at least, to the mid-3rd century where we are now, where we're talking about Aurelian, Emperor Aurelian, and how he was involved in the use of a church house and who would meet there, and Paul of Samosata, and getting him out of there. So he had kind of an agreeable attitude at one point, but then Eusebius says he changed and started persecuting us. And we saw similarly something with Domitian, it seemed, at least in our analysis, that he wasn't quite the persecution a lot of people say, but was a heavy persecution nonetheless. But it was mixed, right? People recall, different things happen. So I'm saying this and pointing all this out to show not only the ongoing attack by the dragon using the wild beast out of the sea, but to show also why eventually he changes his attack again. He changes his attack again. And in the next video, part 44.7, next Saturday, we're going to go from 250 to after the Council of Nicaea. And I believe you're going to see very clearly the dragon changing from this beast, this multi-beast beast, to a dragon with 2 horns like a lamb, with all the authority of the multi-beast beast, and even making an image and having people worship it while pretending to be something like a lamb. So I hope you'll join me next Saturday as we continue our discussion of Revelation chapters 11 through 13. A lot of good information here. There's a lot more I could have covered and included, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we're doing a fairly reasonable, progressive evaluation of these different periods of time, from the death and resurrection of Jesus and his enthronement in heaven, and the ousting of Satan and his angels from heaven, and their imprisoning on the earth, this rage, these attacks, the seed of the woman surviving, continuing on, and here to this very day, and to proclaim our faith in the one who made all this possible, right? Gave his life, God's Son, was existing in the form of a God, I should say, or God, right? Son of God, spirit being, like God, only begotten God, firstborn of all creation. He came down from heaven and lived as a man, the last Adam man, and gave his life in faithful service to God, never having sinned, spotless and unblemished, just like a lamb described in Revelation 5 that tells us very clearly why he's given honor and worship and praise as God's king. Not because he's God, but because he became lower than the gods, died faithful to God, and God resurrected him and gave him the name above every name so that he could sit on God's throne in his name and administer his will, since he only does what he observes the Father doing. And in doing so, he gave his life for us, his physical body, which is represented by the bread, and the wine, which represents his blood. I hope you all enjoyed that and it was informative and encouraging to you all. I'll say one final hello or goodbye here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll put a notice up around 11 or 12 my time, noonish. And it'll be a total open session, right? Whoever's for whatever I see in first, that's what I'll deal with. And we'll do the best we can to answer any good questions that are something we can benefit from. Like you're all having a good time. Stay faithful. Do your best. Focus on God, Jesus, you and me, those closest to you, right? Don't make it harder on yourself than it needs to be. Be patient. Be deliberate. Think about what you're doing and do the best you can. Loving God with your whole heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Thank you all once again for joining me. Have a blessed afternoon, evening, or day, depending on where you are. And may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name. Yeah. Sure got a little loose there. Apologize for that.